I will break your arm and leave you disabled, my brother-in-law roared, hurling a pair of heavy leather MMA gloves directly at my face. My name is Dana Pierce. I am 32 years old, and I was standing in the middle of my own living room surrounded by 15 relatives who had spent the entire evening treating my house like a battlefield. The gloves struck my shoulder and dropped to the hardwood floor with a dull thud that seemed to echo through the whole room. My brother-in-law stepped forward, a massive amateur fighter who had spent years using his size to intimidate everyone around him, puffing out his chest as though he already owned the house I had spent 4 years paying for. I looked over at my husband, the man who was supposed to be the first person standing between me and danger, and found him frozen near the kitchen counter staring at the floor. What my brother-in-law did not notice because he was too busy performing for an audience was the quiet older man sitting perfectly still in the corner armchair, a man who had barely spoken a single word all evening. Nobody in that room, including my brother-in-law, understood what kind of stillness they were looking at, and in exactly 15 seconds, that stillness was about to answer for itself. Before I explain how that moment unfolded, let me take you back to where this entire nightmare began, because none of it happened without warning. Early last summer, my husband Marcus and I moved into a quiet suburb outside Ridgeview, Texas, a house I had spent 4 years saving for alongside him, contributing exactly half the down payment through countless overtime shifts at the office. Marcus had always played the role of the easygoing peacemaker in our marriage, and for a few short weeks I genuinely believed we were starting a peaceful new chapter together. That illusion shattered only 3 weeks later, when Marcus' brother Derek and his wife Renee unexpectedly signed a lease on the house sitting directly next to our fence line. I already knew exactly who Derek was, because he never missed a chance to remind everyone at family gatherings about the years he had spent training in mixed martial arts, treating intimidation like a sport and violence like an acceptable form of conversation. The boundary violations started within days of them moving in, and they came all at once rather than one at a time. One Saturday morning, I stepped outside to find my backyard gate wide open, my brand new lawnmower being dragged across Derek's overgrown lawn, my garden hose stretched across the property line washing his truck, and Renee standing in my kitchen doorway holding 2 cartons of my milk she had taken while I was upstairs in the shower. When I confronted them, Derek did not even pause his scrubbing, telling me flatly that his brother's house was his house and asking if I had a problem with that, while Renee sighed dramatically and accused me of being selfish over a lawnmower and a little bit of food. I turned toward Marcus, expecting him to finally draw a line, and for one brief moment he actually tried, stepping forward and saying, "Derek, enough." Derek turned on him instantly, reminding him in front of everyone exactly who had always protected him growing up, and Marcus visibly shrank, mumbling an apology and pulling me back inside before I could say another word. I thought that Saturday was the worst of it. I had no idea it was only the beginning. By October, my privacy had been violated in ways I never expected. I left work early one Wednesday with a blinding migraine, only to find an unfamiliar car blocking my garage and my front door already unlocked. Climbing the stairs toward the sound of laughter, I found Renee standing inside my own master bedroom giving a full tour to 3 strangers holding iced coffee, running her hands across my closet like she was showing off a listing. When I demanded an explanation, she brushed past me, insisting I was overreacting to a harmless tour, and it was only later that night, after everyone left, that I realized something far more disturbing. She had not broken a window or forced a lock. She had used an actual key. When Marcus finally came home, I held out my hand and asked him with freezing calm exactly how his sister-in-law had gotten inside our locked house. He confessed that Derek had cornered him in the driveway days earlier demanding a spare key, and rather than refuse his own brother a second time, Marcus had simply handed it over without telling me. I asked him why he had not warned me, and he had no real answer, just the same nervous excuse about family not needing to ask permission. Something inside my marriage cracked permanently in that moment, and I understood I was no longer protected inside my own home. I told myself things could not get much worse. I was wrong about that too. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, everything escalated at once. Renee dropped a handwritten grocery list on my counter and announced my house would be hosting dinner for 15 relatives, dictating the menu and telling me I would be paying for it myself while cleaning the guest bathrooms to her standard. That same evening, Derek marched through my hallway and declared my private home office would become the drinking and card room for the men during the party. I stepped in front of him and refused, explaining the room held sensitive work documents and the laptop my father had given me the day I landed my first corporate job, then closed the door and locked it directly in his face. His humiliation turned instantly to rage, and he screamed that I had made him lose face in front of his family, ordering Marcus to control me. The next morning, I woke to the sound of scraping metal and found Marcus on his knees in front of my office, prying the lock apart with a screwdriver because Derek had demanded it be opened. I did not scream. I simply watched my own husband destroy my property to keep the peace with his brother, understanding now that he was no longer a passive bystander in my abuse. He had become an active participant in it. That same afternoon, while everyone gathered for Thanksgiving, I discovered my young nephew Caleb sitting at my ruined desk with fried chicken in one hand and a soda spilling directly into the laptop keyboard. The one connection I still had to my father, destroyed in seconds. When I ordered him out, Derek filled the doorway, growling that his son could play if he wanted, and I refused to back down, pointing him toward the hallway in front of everyone. That was the moment his fragile ego finally broke completely, and he reached for the gloves in his gym bag. He never made it 2 steps toward me. My father exploded out of that armchair with a speed nobody in the room thought a man his age still had, stepping smoothly inside Derek's swinging arc, catching his wrist with an iron grip, and driving him downward until his face slammed against the dining table, plates shattering and glasses cracking across the wood. He pinned Derek's arm into a joint lock with his knee against his spine, and the entire takedown took 15 seconds without a single punch thrown. Even pinned to the table, Derek screamed for someone to call the police, clawing his phone from his pocket and telling the operator a maniac had attacked him without provocation, still convinced he held the upper hand even flat on his own face. When officers arrived, they did not simply take my father's word for it. They separated everyone in the room and took statements individually, speaking with 3 relatives who had witnessed Derek throw the gloves and lunge first, examining the shattered lock on my office door, and photographing the ruined laptop with soda still pooled inside the keyboard. Only after piecing together the physical evidence and the matching witness accounts did they conclude that my father had acted in self-defense to stop an active physical assault. He did show them identification confirming his background in federal law enforcement before retirement, which explained the precision of what they had walked in on. But it was the broken lock, the destroyed laptop, and 15 relatives telling the same story that ultimately convinced them who the real aggressor had been. Derek was handcuffed against the wall and charged with assault, criminal mischief, and making a terroristic threat in front of the very family he had spent all evening trying to impress. In the weeks that followed, the consequences arrived exactly as harsh as he deserved. His employer fired him the moment his felony arrest became public record, and the martial arts facility that once celebrated his aggression stripped him of his membership and coaching credentials entirely. I hired an aggressive civil attorney and filed a lawsuit against both Derek and Renee, demanding restitution for the ruined laptop, the destroyed doorframe, and the emotional distress they had caused, freezing their joint accounts while legal fees drained whatever savings remained. One Saturday morning, I looked out my kitchen window and saw folding tables covered in their belongings across their front lawn. Renee sitting behind them in a cheap lawn chair trying to sell furniture to strangers just to cover legal bills, the same woman who had once given tours of my house like she owned the neighborhood. For weeks after that Thanksgiving, Marcus flooded my phone with apologies, voicemails, and desperate excuses about being caught between his wife and his brother. I stayed silent, packed a bag, and moved temporarily into my father's house to think clearly without his voice pulling at me. On Christmas Eve, I agreed to meet him at a small coffee shop, and when he reached across the table for my hand, I pulled it back and slid a thick envelope toward him instead. He stared down at the divorce petition, already signed at the bottom, and asked how I could throw away our marriage over his brother's mistakes. I told him plainly this had never been about his brother. It had always been about him, about the key he handed over without my consent, about the lock he destroyed with his own hands, and that there would be no forgiveness and no reconciliation. The divorce moved quickly once Marcus realized my lawyer had every document needed, and the court ordered our house sold, my exact half of the equity wired directly into my own account within weeks. I used that money to secure a quiet apartment closer to the city, and tonight I am sitting at my new kitchen island sipping tea while my father reads the evening paper across from me in comfortable silence, my repaired laptop resting on the counter beside us. Nobody is screaming outside my window. Nobody is breaking down my doors. Nobody is demanding my submission anymore. The silence in this apartment feels expensive, and it feels completely earned. What I learned through all of it is simple but brutal. That misplaced tolerance is an open invitation for people to take everything you allow them to take. And that blood relation was never a free pass to exploit someone's kindness. Family is supposed to mean protection and respect, not an excuse for endless abuse. And if you keep shrinking your own boundaries just to keep the peace, eventually you lose both the peace and the boundaries entirely. If this story stayed with you until the very end, hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because here on the Revenge Tales, we bring you real stories of betrayal, karma, and the moment someone finally takes their power back. And I will see you in the next story.